Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. A very warm welcome to yet another session of Weekend with Wisdom. Let me begin with a small prayer. Sada Shiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Shri Dakshina Murtaye Namaha. Today is the concluding session by Swami Nikhilananda Saraswati ji on Upadesha Saram of Ramana Maharshi. Swami Nikhilananda Saraswati ji is a teacher of Vedanta and a disciple of Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda ji and Swami Paramananda Bharati ji, born in Mumbai and is currently staying in New Delhi, guiding seekers and teaching them Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, Yoga Sutras and many other texts. And thank you, Swamiji, for taking the time out for this session and giving us your time. And yesterday's session was absolutely wonderful. And we all are looking forward to today's session. Just a small announcement. If you have any questions, you can put it on the Q&A box and Swamiji will take it up at the end of the session. And do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Advaita Academy, and our Twitter handle as well as Facebook page, so that you keep updated about the regular events that we do. So with this very brief opening remarks, I request Swamiji to start the session.
Okay. So I will begin with a prayer. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Hiranyagarbhaya Namaha. Om Shri Mahavishnave Namaha. Om Shri Mahadevaya Namaha. Om Shri Mahadurgaye Namaha. Om Shri Ramaya Namaha. Om Shri Sadgurave Namaha. Om Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krito Vande Bhagavanto Punah Punah Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpada Shankaram Lokashankaram Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Shankaram Paramanandam Brahmanishtam Yatishwaram Bhashyabhrantiharam Vande Shuddhajnanekabodhakam Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. 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 Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Namah Parvati Pataye. Har Har Mahadeva. Hari Om. Hari Om. We are seeing this beautiful text Upadesa Saram by Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi ji. I will give you a brief overview on this text. Yesterday, we had the first session in which briefly I mentioned that the main cause of all our sorrow and suffering and what we call samsara is due to avidya, ignorance of our own self, which causes a false understanding that I am a doer, I am a knower, I am an enjoyer. And with this false understanding, I perform actions. And the results of these actions are given by Ishvara. And I get bound to this mesh of action that itself is called samsara, the ocean of actions. In order to become free of this, we have to gain self-knowledge and gain abidance in it. So to begin with, we follow the path of karma yoga, dedicating all our actions, all our kartavya karma to Ishvara. Then again, we tune to Ishvara, who is our own supreme self, through puja, japa, and chintan. So considering the whole world as the form of Ishvara, we do the seva of this world, seva of Ishvara through the world, chant his name, that is japa, and then do chintan on Bhagavan's Swarupa. First, we understand theoretically the nature of Ishvara and understand our identity with Ishvara and gain abidance in this. That itself is the ultimate goal of all sadhanas. Ristale manasvastata kriya bhakti yoga bodhascha nishchitam. Bhagavan says to gain that abidance in our rit. Rit is that Atma, Supreme Self. Itself is the aim and goal of all sadhana. Our mind, which is wandering in the world restlessly, should be quietened and made to abide in our own Supreme Self. And that we do through Karma Yoga. But the mind can also be simultaneously controlled through Pranayama. And that is what Bhagavan tells us in the verses ahead. Through Pranayama, we can control this mind. So let us chant some verses from 11th verse onwards. Vayurodhana liyate manah jalapakshiva sadhanam chittavayavashchitkriayutaha shakayurdvayi shaktimulaka laya vinashane ubhayarodhane layagatam punar bhavati nomritam pranabandhana lina manasam ekachintana nashamityadaha nashtamanasotkrishtha yoginaha pratyamasti kim swastitim yataha drishyavaritam chittamatmanaha chitvadarshanam tatvadarshanam. Bhagavan says this, our pranas, when we pranas express in our this body, prana is the kriya shakti of Ishvara, his power, and it expresses in this our body as pran, apan, vyan, udan, sama, the various physiological functions in the body, the powerhouse which makes this body function. Not only the body function, but it makes our senses, our mind, everything function. It's the power behind all activities. So these pranas are connected to our mind. It supplies energy to the mind. It supplies the power to the mind. And pranas, as I said, expressed to the physiological functions. Even our breathing is due to the pranas. So by controlling our breathing, by regulating our breathing, that is the technique of pranayama, we can control our mind. So Bhagavan says, Vayu Rodhana liyate manah. Through this Vayu Rodhan, by pranayam, the mind gets subdued. Just as a bird is there flying everywhere, we can catch the bird and keep it in a cage so that it doesn't fly. Similarly, the mind, which is flying everywhere, thinking of all objects, can be restrained through pranayama. Because the pranas and the mind are the twofold Shakti of that one Ishvara only. Mind also is a Shakti of Ishvara. Mind is an expression of Bhagavan's Avyakta Prakriti only. And then this pranas, it activates this Avyakta Prakriti. So they are related. So when we control pranas, the mind also simultaneously get controlled. Just like one branch of a tree, if you hold it, the other branch also come under our control. So chitta vayavas chit kriya yutas shakhayodvai shakti mulaka. The main mula of this, both this shakti is that same Ishvara Shakti only. So we need to control this mind to help us in our chintan, in our reflection. So laya vinashane ubhay rodhane laya gatam punar bhavati no mritam. So mind which is controlled with pranayam, it remains steady for some time. But then when we stop our pranayam, again the mind becomes restless. So the mind which is being controlled through pranayam should be engaged in chintan. The main idea about pranayam is to help us quieten the mind so that we can use the quietened mind for chintan. And through this chintan only, we can transcend the mind and come to recognize our own self. So what is that chintan? So Bhagavan says ki prana bandhanat leena manasam eka chintanat nashametyadaha. That the mind which has been controlled through pranayam need to be engaged in eka chintan. Eka chintan means chintan of that eka, chintan of that one supreme reality. In fact, the very essence or very theme of all Vedanta text is to understand the oneness of that Atma. In the Bhashya of Brahma Sutra, also Bhagavan in Adhyat Bhashya, he tells the theme of all the Vedanta Granthas. He says, Atma ekatva vidya pratipattaye sarve Vedanta arabhyante. That all Vedanta texts are meant to give us that Atma ekatva vidya. That Atma is one. See, now we experience ourselves limited to this body. But really speaking, and we think that the other person, that another Atma is there. In the other being, another Atma is there. But really speaking, Atma is one only. It is Sarvatma. And that Sarvatma is also called Brahma or Param Atma. So to recognize that Paramatma, to recognize the oneness of Atma is the main theme and goal of all the Vedanta and all sadhana. And that itself can destroy the avidya, the false notion which we have about ourselves, and give us moksha. So eka chintan means ekatva chintan. Ekatva chintanat nashametyadaha. The mind gets destroyed. Here the mind gets destroyed means the sense of duality which we have. See, our mind creates or gives us a sense of duality. Because of the thoughts which are there in our mind, we experience this world through our mind, and it gives a sense of duality, that I am different, this world is different, other beings are different. So that duality gets produced, which is wrong. Really speaking, everything is one. Ekameva advitiyam Brahma. Everything is one Brahma only. Neha nanasti kinchana. There are no divisions, there are no variety. There is only one, that supreme Atma only. But that mind, due to ignorance, gives rise to a notion of duality. So through Ekachintan, we destroy this notion of duality. Destroying the mind doesn't mean the mind is really destroyed, but we destroy the notion of duality caused by ignorance in the mind. So Ekachintanat Nashametyadaha. So one who recognizes this oneness of that Atma becomes free, is called Jivan Mukta, is called Sthita Prajna, is called a yogi. Different names are used in our text. Mahatma, one who has gained aparoksha anubhuti. Here Bhagavan calls such a person a yogi. He says, Nashtamanasaha Utkrishta Yoginaha Krityamastikim Swastitim Yataha. This Utkrishta yogi, the best yogi, who has gained abidance in his own real self, means who has recognized his own self. Such a yogi, having recognized his self, continues to function, continues to be seen functioning through the body. The body doesn't disappear after self-realization. The world doesn't disappear after self-realization. The Dvaita Bhavana disappears. The false notion disappears. The false notion that I am the doer, enjoyer, experiencer disappears. World doesn't disappear because world is not a result of avidya. World is expression of Bhagavan's Shakti called Maya. So after self-realization, world doesn't disappear, but the false notion disappears. The Kartrutva Bhavana disappears. So the whole thing remains same. Even activities are being seen, performed by an enlightened person, but from his own standpoint, he is not doing anything. Naiva kinchit karomiti. In Gita also Bhagavan says, he knows, enlightened person knows that I am not doing anything. Pashyam shrunvan sprishan jigran ashnam gachan swapan shwashan pralapan vishrujan grunhan unmishan nimishan napi. All the activities of the body, mind, senses, pranas, everything seems to be happening, but he knows, Naiva kinchit karomi, that I am not doing anything. Because I am not the doer. All this is happening by Prakriti only. Prakritim kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha. Ahankara vimodhatma karta ahamiti manyate. A person who is deluded, having ignorance, thinks that I am the doer. But an enlightened person knows that I am not a doer. So there is no duties left for him because there is no sense of doership itself. So krityam astikim swastitim yataha. So that is the purpose of Ekachintan, Ekatva Chintan, to recognize the oneness of this self, recognize the real identity of our own self by shifting our attention from everything else and focusing on our own inner self. Shuddrishya varitam chittam atmanaha chitva darshanam tattva darshanam. When our attention gets shifted from all other objects, from the drishya, we have to shift our attention to the drashta and recognize the real nature of this drashta and gain abidance in it. So pranayam helps to quieten the mind, and further through Ekachintan, we gain that abidance. So what was said before as Chintan on Ishvara, and that Abheda Chintan, that itself is mentioned here as Ekachintan or Ekatva Chintan. So to make it more clear, about what exactly is the nature of our own self. Ultimately, we have to know ourselves. So what is this self? What is the mystery of our own self? That Bhagavan reveals in the following shlokas, very deep and very beautiful shlokas, wherein he gives the technique or the steps of inquiry into the real nature of our own self. Let us chant a few of these verses. Manasam tu kim margani krite naiva manasam marga arjavat vrittayastvaham vrittimashritah vrittayo mano vidyaham manah ahamayam kuto bhavati chinvatah aipatatyaham nija vicharanam ahamishabhajaham ahantaya spuratirutsvayam paramapurnasat idamaham padabhikyamanvaham ahamilinake pelaya sattaya. Bhagavan says, you start inquiring into this self, and whoever is to come to Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi for any advice or any help, is to ask them to inquire, who is the one who is having this problem? Who are you? Find out. Go deep into yourself and inquire, who exactly are you? Who is having this problem? Who is sad? Who wants to gain happiness? Who is feeling frightened? Who is bound? Inquire into your real nature. Don't assume that you know yourself. See, we have this assumption that I know myself. If you ask anyone, who are you, they give a long lecture on who they are. But our assumption is wrong. Because just by analyzing our three states of experience, we will know that our assumption that I know myself is wrong. In the waking, if somebody asks me, I give my name, give my address, I talk about myself, who am I? I'm experiencing myself at a particular place, in particular situation, in the waking. But then when I go to sleep and I dream, the dream world has got no relationship with what I am in the waking. I might be asleep on the bed, but in the dream I am walking, I am swimming, sometimes I am flying. If somebody asks me, what are you doing? I will say, I am flying like a bird. So who am I? Am I the one who is sleeping on the bed, or am I one who is flying in the air? Because that is also my direct experience. I am experiencing myself as flying. Then again, when the mind also gets withdrawn, when the mind also becomes silent, I go into deep sleep. And that is also my experience. I am there. Mind is not functioning. Body is not functioning. I am not identified with the body, the mind, but I am there. So who am I? What is my nature there? There are no actions happening there. There are no experience happening there. There is no knowledge happening there. When I wake up and I think about my deep sleep, I am totally what you call empty about it. What exactly it is, I don't know. So that is my real nature, but I am unaware of it. I don't have any knowledge about it. So we have to find out what exactly is my own self, that innermost self, what is its identity, what is its nature. And to find that self, we have to go to it through the mind. Because in the waking, and we have to do this exercise in the waking state. In the waking, we have to experience ourselves beyond our body, our mind, that real self. So through the mind, we have to approach ourselves. Therefore, here Bhagavan helps us in this inquiry. He says, find out what is this mind. Manasam tukim margane krite naiva manasam marga arjava. If you follow this path through the mind, you will reach yourself and you will know that in that self, there is no mind. There are no divisions of any kind. Everything is that self alone. There is no mind. There are no thoughts. There are no emotions. There are no divisions of seer and seen. There is only that one supreme homogeneous self alone. So through the mind, you reach the self. So how that inquiry should be done? So when we look at our mind, the mind is made up of thoughts. Vrittayastvaham vrittimashrita vrittayo mano vidyaham manaha. The mind is made up of thoughts. And there are two types of thoughts. Thoughts of the world and thoughts of the self. Thought of the self and thought of the world. See, our mind is like a camera which takes a photograph. So one is, it takes the photograph of the world and it also takes a selfie. That selfie which the Antakarana takes is the Aham vritti. And the photograph of the world which it takes is called Idam vritti. So the mind is made, mind here means Antakarana, is made up of two types of vrittis. Idam vritti and Aham vritti. These are just photographs. Just as, let us say, a flower is there and you take a photograph of that flower, the flower is different from the photograph. The flower is outside and the photograph is there in the camera. Then you turn the camera towards yourself and take a selfie. That photograph of yourself is there in it, but that is a photograph. It is different from you. Similarly, there is that innermost self which doesn't have a thought, which doesn't have any emotions, which doesn't have any form. My own inner self, which I experience when I am in deep sleep. And the interesting thing is that my experience of deep sleep and your experience and everyone's experience is same, because we are all experiencing the same self. That self is one. So the image of that self, or vritti of that self, is called Aham vritti, which happens in the mind. And the vritti of this world, which happens in the mind, is called Idam vritti. They're both vrittis only. So suppose you have a photograph of a flower and you look at the photograph, then you can shift your attention from there and directly look at that flower which is there outside. Similarly, if you have a selfie, you look at that photograph and then you can experience your own self here. In the same way, the vrittis of the world, they belong to the objects of this world. But the vritti of the self, that Aham vritti, is of that inner self. So through that Aham vritti, we have to recognize that inner self. Instead of focusing our attention on the vritti, we should shift our attention to that self, whose vritti it is. Because even the idam vrittis are based and supported by this Aham vritti only. So vrittayastvaham vrittimashrita vrittayo mano viddi aham manaha. Therefore, the very essence of mana is this aham vritti. So Bhagavan says that you find out the source of this aham vritti. Aham ayam kuto bhavati chinvata. Find out that I, whose this aham vritti is. Find out means go back beyond this vritti and gain that aparoksha anubhuti of yourself. Identify with yourself. Not look at yourself not through the vritti, but as you are. Be as you are. As you were in the deep sleep also, I remain free of vrittis. I exist without the need for vrittis. And that's what Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi also experienced. He had that fear of death. And he decided that let me see my death directly. So he laid down on the ground and just imitated death. And his body became stiff, his breathing slowed down, and his vrittis also slowed down. And still he felt that, oh, I am still alive. Then his vrittis also stopped. And he could experience his own inner self beyond the vrittis. And he realized that I exist different from all these vrittis, unaffected by the vrittis, not dependent on the vrittis. My existence doesn't depend on my thoughts. My existence doesn't depend on this body. Even if the body falls down dead, even if all the thoughts disappear, my existence doesn't get affected a bit. And that experience remained with him all the time. That is called aparoksha anubhuti of his own self. So that he could see his own body functioning, he could see his own mind functioning. But he knew that all this is just my expression. I am different from this. Satchidananda Brahma. So same path he advocated to others also. He find out the source of this I thought. Find out the object of this I thought. Just like when we look into the mirror, we see some object through in the mirror. Something interesting we just happen to see in the mirror. Sometimes we see, let us say we are just driving or we are in the car, and on the rear view mirror we happen to see, oh, there is some object fallen down there. So we don't try to catch it, don't try to pick it up by touching the mirror, but we get out of the car and pick up that object. Similarly, in the mind, we see the aham vritti, that aham vritti belongs to me. So shift your attention from the vritti and recognize yourself as you are. Let the vritti fall down. Let the vritti disappear. It doesn't matter. When we come to realize ourselves, the vritti will just fall off. Bhagavan says, Ai patatyaham, this aham patati, this aham vritti will just fall off when we come to see ourselves directly. So nija vicharanam, this is the self-inquiry. And when that aham vritti falls down, when that aham vritti disappears, what will be my experience? Bhagavan says, ahami nasha bhaji, aham taya spurati rut swayam parama purna sat. He says, when that aham vritti falls down, when we shift our attention from the aham vritti to that I, that real I, which is beyond the vritti, then what will happen? The aham vritti will fall down. And that real self will shine forth by itself. Because my attention now is on the vritti, but when it gets shifted to the self will shine forth by itself. It is called spuranam, atma spuranam. And that self will shine as aham, aham. Means I will experience aparoksha, directly my own existence as this inner self. See, in ignorance, I think I am the body. I feel my existence in the mind. But when I transcend the mind through this inquiry, I will experience my existence as this inner self. My being is this inner self, which spontaneously express as myself, aham, aham, aham. And which is parama purna sat. This, the real nature of this I is param, it is supreme. It is purna, it is complete, and it is sat. It is pure existence, what we call pure existence, consciousness, bliss, Satchidananda Swarup, Purna Brahma. That is my real nature. So through this self-inquiry, we have to reach our own inner self, that Pratyek Atma, and recognize that Pratyek Atma as that Parama Purna Sat, as that Supreme Brahma. See, this is a very subtle and very deep path which Bhagavan had revealed. It might take many hours and years of sincere, dedicated effort to pursue this path and gain that abidance in our own self. So, what is you are saying that that self will shine forth by itself when that aham vritti also, in which that aham vritti also falls off. So, what is the nature of this self? Because this aham vritti, it comes and it goes also. It rises and it falls. See, in deep sleep, we don't have this aham vritti. And when we are engaged in some activities here, the aham vritti is forgotten, then again it arises. So this aham vritti goes into laya. But what about that atma? Is there laya for that atma? Bhagavan says no. He says, idam aham pada bhikkyamanvaham ahamilina ke api alaya sattaya. He said that Supreme Atma, which is also named as Aham. See, Atma is also called Aham. This vritti is also called Aham vritti. And false notion of Aham is called Ahankar. When I consider myself the body, the mind, the doer, knower, enjoyer, that is Ahankar. That is a false notion created or as a result of my ignorance. Then there is this aham vritti, which is naturally, it arises in the presence of Atma. But that Atma itself is also named as Aham. So Bhagavan says, idam aham abhikhyam. So this Atma, which is named as Aham, what is the beauty of this Atma? He says that even when the Aham vritti goes into laya, when we go to sleep, when we go into deep sleep, what happens? The Aham vritti goes into laya avastha, means it is not there. In deep sleep, Aham vritti is also not there. But in deep sleep, that Atma remains awake. See, deep sleep is nothing but the stopping of our mind, our intellect doesn't function there. So it is the avastha of the mind, not avastha of the Atma. Atma remains awake all the time. Atma doesn't go to sleep. So that Atma, which is which is named as Aham, doesn't have a laya. It doesn't go into dissolution. It doesn't become unmanifest. It doesn't dissolve. So ahamilina ke api alaya sattaya. It has got alaya satta. It has got uninterrupted existence, pure uninterrupted existence, unchanging existence. That is my very nature. So anvaham means every day when I go to sleep also, the aham vritti gets dissolved, but that aham, that atma remains there, unchanged. In the Upanishad also, it is said that when we go to deep sleep, we become one with that Brahma. We are one with Brahma. But since that ignorance is not negated, when the buddhi wakes up, antakarana wakes up, again the identification with the antakarana happens, and we continue to experience this samsara. So one has to recognize that real nature of our own self. So first step is to take the help of the mind, take the help of the vrittis, take the help of the aham vritti, and then go and seek the source of that aham vritti. And that source of that aham vritti is the pratyek atma, the inner self. In Gita, Bhagavan calls that pratyek atma as kshetrajna, as the knower of this world, which is different from all that is known. So our body, the world, the senses, the mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankar, all these are known. They are called kshetra. And the knower separate from all this is called kshetrajna. And in deep sleep, I remain separated from all this. But in the waking and dream, I identify with all this. So that kshetrajna, that pratyek atma, we have to, which we experience all the time, and we experience separated from our upadhis in deep sleep, we have to experience it in the waking state through this inquiry. Through this self-inquiry, we have to locate our own inner self. By tracing the path of this aham vritti to its source. See, Bhagavan used to give example of that a dog was looking for his master. The dog got separated from his master and he was looking for the master everywhere. In a crowded place, he got separated from his master and he was worried, where is my master? So some other dog gave him advice that, can you smell the odor of your master here? The dog says, yes. Dog said, you just follow this fragrance, follow this odor, follow where it is coming from. What is its source? Just keep following it. And when you reach the source, you will meet your master. So he just followed that source, that what you call odor, and then he just it became more and more strong, and finally when it became strong, he could actually see his master. Similarly, this aham vritti, you follow it, go it to its source, and the source of this aham vritti is aham atma. Aham atma gudhakesha sarva bhuta shayastitaha aham adishcha madhyancha bhutana anta evata. In Gita also Bhagavan says that I am that Atma residing in the heart of all being. Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi in his famous shloka, also he conveys this very beautifully, that what is indicated in all the Upanishads as Brahma is your own Atma. So he says, Hridaya Kuhara Madhe Kevalam Brahma Matram Yaham Ahamiti Sakshat Atma Rupena Bhati Ridi Vishamanasa Swam Chinvata Majjatava Pavana Chalana Rodhat Atmanishto Bhavatvam. He says that which is indicated in all the Shastras as Brahma, as Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, as the very cause of this world. Janmadhyasya yataha, the Janma, Sthiti and Laya of this whole world happens in Brahma. That Brahma is expressing in your own Antakarana as Aham, Aham, Aham. Aham, Spuranam is there. That aparoksha anubhuti of my own presence is there within. I feel my own existence without even need for any thoughts. I just know that I am. It's so mysterious. See, in deep sleep state, we don't have any thoughts, no emotions, no thoughts, no actions are happening. But when I wake up, means when the mind wakes up, I say I was asleep, I was there. Nobody says that I was not there. Nobody says that he was non-existent. So even without the thoughts, I knew my own existence. That self one has to recognize in the waking, seek it and find it through this inquiry by holding on to the Aham vritti and go back to the source. Find out whose vritti it is and just remain as that self. Atmanishto bhavatvam pavana riti vishamanasasvam. That Brahma which is indicated in the Upanishad is expressing in our own self, own antakarana as the self, as Aham, Aham, Aham. Hridaya kuhara medde kevalam brahma matram Aham, Aham, Aham iti sakshat Atma rupena bhati. Hridaya visha. Bhagavan says you enter your own antakarana through pranayama, through inquiry, through diving into your own antakarana and come to see your own inner self and just remain there as yourself. Atmanishto bhavatvam. So this inquiry we have to do taking the support of Aham vritti. Aham vritti itself is not Atma, it is just an image of Atma. So that Atma, our own inner self, is really of the nature of Sat. And that Atma itself is Brahma, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. And everything what we experience as this world, as our body and mind is Asat. Asat means changing. In English, actually, many of our beautiful Sanskrit words are translated in English and they lose their real meaning, their significance. Asat is usually translated as unreal. Asat is not unreal. Asat means changing. It is existing, changing existence. In Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan defines this Satya and Asatya. In that second chapter, na sato vidyate bhavaha, na bhavo vidyate sataha. So if we ascertain the nature of a particular object through our buddhi, when we come to know that this object is this way, later on it changes. So if its nature, its expression changes, then it is called asat. But once you ascertain the nature of an object, it doesn't change. That is called Sat. So any object of this world, its nature keeps on changing. In the sense, it keeps on changing its form. Everything in this world changes. So it is called, the world is called Asat. Asat means changing existence. This world is also expression of Brahma, but a very mysterious expression of Brahma. Though Brahma is changeless, the world is changing. And that Atma is a Sat. Sat means changeless existence. So that is what Bhagavan says, Vigrahendriya pranadhetamaha naham ekasat tad jadam hi asat. He said this body, our indriya, the pranas, the antakarana, all these are asat, changing, jada, inert. But that Atma is Sat, changeless. How do we know it is changeless? See, when we experience that Atma, when we are in deep sleep, that experience remains same. Whenever we go to sleep, we experience the same Atma. Means whenever we leave our body, mind aside and experience ourselves, we experience ourselves in the same way. If a child goes to sleep, if an elderly person goes to sleep, if a sick person, rich person, poor person, they experience the same Atma. Therefore, the nature of that Atma doesn't change. Therefore, it is called Sat. And the nature of this world changed. Therefore, it is called Asat, changing existence. The world is not mithya. World is not an illusion. World is not non-existent. World is a changing existence. It is constantly changing. It is expression of that Brahma only, our own real self. So that Atma is Sat. So once we, through this inquiry, once we reach that inner self, when we recognize our own inner self, we have to understand that that inner self is Brahma. We have to understand that inner self is of the nature of Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. And the nature of this self and nature of the self of, it is itself the self of all. It itself is the very self of Ishvara. So I and Ishvara are not two. I and Ishvara are one only. In the state of ignorance, I feel I am different, Ishvara is different. Ishvara is big. The entire world is his body. Ishvara is all-knowing, all-powerful. And I am small. This is my body. I have a limited mind, intellect. But if we transcend this body and come to recognize myself, my inner self, that inner self and the inner self of Ishvara is one only. The outer upadis are just like dress. So my dress is different, Ishvara's dress is different. Isha jivayor veshadhi vida. Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi says that the difference between Ishvara and Jiva is only in vesha, the dress of this physical body, and the dhi, the sukshma sharir, are different. But they are not my nature anyway. I am inert to that also. So Sat Swabhavato Vastu Kevalam, in my real nature, I and Ishvara are one. So through this inquiry, we have to transcend this, this conditioning and come to recognize our inner self. So Veshahanata Swatma Darshanam, Isha Darshanam, Swatma Rupataha. So Ishwar Darshan is Swatma Darshan only. When I recognize myself, that self, inner self, is Ishvara Swarup only. So Isha Darshanam is Swatma Rupataha. Isha Darshan is Swatma Darshan only. There's no separation. And Atma Darshan is gained by gaining abidance in ourselves. See, all the time we are ourselves. We don't have to go somewhere to reach ourselves. We don't have to do something to reach ourselves. But because of ignorance, we have identified with the expression of this self, the body, the mind, the world. So we have to understand our supreme nature and gain abidance in that self. That's called Atmanishtha. So Atma Samsthiti, Swatma Darshanam, Atma Nidvayat, Atmanishtata. That Atmanishtha is very important because Atma is one has to gain that Nishtha, that abidance in that Atma. So that Atma is of the nature of Sat, and that Atma is also of the nature of Chit. Jnanavarjita ajnanahina Chit. Jnanamastikim jnatamantaram. So that Atma is also indicated as Chit. Chit means pure knowledge, not an activity of knowledge. In that Atma is of the nature of knowledge. But when it expresses through the mind, through the intellect, then there is activity of knowledge happens. So in the waking and in our dream, activity of knowledge happens. We know something, we don't know something. But Atma itself is beyond both knowing and not knowing. It is beyond all that is known and beyond all that is unknown. It is beyond the activity of knowing and not knowing. So though we use the term jnanam for that Atma, that jnanam is not the bauddhic jnanam. With the help of buddhi, we gain knowledge, and sometimes we have ignorance. But that knowledge and ignorance of the buddhi is the activity of knowledge, is the expression of that supreme knowledge. But that supreme knowledge by itself is beyond both knowing and not knowing, beyond all that is known and beyond all that is unknown. So jnana varjita ajnana hina chit jnanamastikim jnatumantaram. And Sat Swabhava, before that, in the 23rd verse, Sat Swabhav sikas chit pravetara sattayahi chit chittayahi aham. This Atma which is Sat, that same Atma is of the nature of Chit, and that Chit itself is called Jnanam. So Atma is Sat, Chit, and Atma is also Sukham. That's what now, in the next verse, Bhagavan says, that when you inquire into the real nature of this Atma, you will know that it is also Sukha. He says, Kim Swarupamiti Atma Darshane Avyaya Bhava Apurna Chit Sukham. So through that inquiry, we have to reach our Pratyeka Atma, the innermost self. And that self, we should understand it as Apurna Chit Sukham. As Apurna means complete, of the nature of Sat. And it is Chit. It is also Chit, that pure knowledge, knowledge by itself, not activity of knowledge. And Sukham, it is of the nature of bliss. Apurna Chit Sukham. So Kim Swarupamiti Atma Darshane Avyaya Bhava Apurna Chit Sukham. So that innermost self is of the nature of Apurna Chit Sukham is of the nature of that Brahma, which is Sat Chit Ananda Swarup, which is Ananta. That Ananta Brahma am I. See, I'm going through it very quickly because of lack of enough time, but giving you the sar. And it's very deep and very interesting. So I would encourage you to study it in more depth and pursue this path sincerely. So again, to refresh your memory about what we have done. So in the beginning, Bhagavan indicated in this Upadesa Saram that we have all fallen into this Kriti Mahodadhav, in the ocean of karma, in the ocean of doing. And this we have fallen and we are stuck into it because of our notion that I am a doer. Why do I think I am a doer? Because I am seeing the body functioning, I see the mind functioning. I have identified with this body, mind as myself, and I think I am the doer. When the body walks, I say I am walking. When the eyes see, I say I am seeing. When the ears hear, I say I am hearing. Though in deep sleep, when I am alone with myself, there is no walking, there is no activity, there is no seeing, hearing, thinking, nothing is happening. Because in me, all these are not there. In me, they are not there. These are all features of the body, the mind, intellect. Doing, knowing, enjoying, experiencing are all features of the body, the mind, the intellect, not of the Atma. Just like a pot, it has got a shape, it has got some color and all. These are all features of the pot, not of the space which is there within. That pot space is as though stuck into this pot. Though that space is infinite, all pervading, but it as though is stuck into this pot and thinks that I am the pot. If the pot moves, it thinks I am moving. If the pot is big, it says I am big. If the pot is cracked, it says I am a cracked pot. But that inner space is really the total space. Space doesn't have any division. Nothing can divide space. Similarly, our body is like this pot, but that inner space is that inner Atma, which is really all pervading Supreme Brahman. It has got no divisions. We assume the division because of identification with this body, mind. So this false notion of doership, enjoyership, knowership, kartrutva, bhoktrutva, and nyatrutva is there, which we have to drop, gain the proper understanding of our own self. And for this, we begin our path by following the path of karma yoga. Many people, they just neglect this karma yoga. They think, oh, it is for initial student. I have become more expert. I can drop all my karmas and just meditate. That will not take us far. Karma is very important. In Gita also Bhagavan says, just by dropping karma and taking sannyas, you will not attain that supreme. Na karmanam anarambhat neshkarmyam purushoshnute na cha sanyasanadeva siddhim samadhigacchati. So we have to perform karma. Sve sve karmani abhirataha siddhim vindanti manavaha. So first step is karma yoga. Dedicate your actions to Ishvara, means tune to Ishvara. Tune yourself to Ishvara through your karma. Understand that He is the one who is functioning through you. He is the one who is the real doer. He is the one whose Shakti is making everything function. So through japa, through puja, through chintan, we have to identify with that Ishvara and understand my own self as the self of Ishvara and gain abidance. And for this, we require purity of the mind as well as the quietude of the mind. So for that quietude of the mind, we can take help of pranayama. So through pranayama, the mind becomes quietened, the mind becomes steady. And with a steady mind, we should do ekachintan, ekachintanat nashamityadah. So through ekatva chintan, through the chintan of oneness of that Atma, the sense of duality get destroyed. Mind getting destroyed means sense of duality gets destroyed. Sense of duality, which is caused by ignorance, get destroyed. So we have to gain that abidance in ourselves. And to help in this self-inquiry, Bhagavan says that you start with your mind. Look at the thoughts and look at that Aham vritti, which is the basic thought. And that Aham vritti is of the self, your real self. That real self itself is felt through the thoughts as Aham vritti. In the Adhyal Bhashya also, Bhagavan Shankaracharya writes about this. Ki yushmat asmat pratyaya gocharayoho vishay vishayanoho tamak prakashavad viruddha svabhavayoho. That there are these two types of vritti. Yushmat vritti means idam vritti and aham vritti. This aham vritti belongs to that Atma, pratyek Atma, and idam vritti belongs to this world. But both are vrittis, and we have got confused about this vritti. Anyanya adhyas has happened between these vrittis. And this anyanya adhyas which has happened between these vrittis are false, is false. World is not false. Atma is not false. This adhyas which has happened in our buddhi between the two types of vrittis is false. Ahamidam, mamaidam, this type of notions we have created about our own body, which is false. So through this aham vritti, we have to go to its source and recognize that pratyek Atma first. And then understand that pratyek Atma as parama chit sukham, as apurna chit sukham. As that apurna chit sukham is Brahma. So recognize that inner self as Brahma. So this is what all the Upanishads, everything teaches us. In a beautiful, in his own special way, Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi taught what the Upanishads are teaching. Not anything different from the Upanishad. That the Upanishads also tells us that Tattvamasi, you are that. So in this, three words are there, you are that. So, or Aham Brahmasmi, that Aham first we have to recognize as our inner self. And after recognizing that Aham, we should know that Aham as Brahma. Many people commit mistake by considering Ahankar as Brahma. Ahankar is not Brahma. Aham vritti is not Brahma. Ahankar is not Brahma. Aham vritti is not Brahma. Aham is Brahma, which is beyond vrittis, that Aham, pratyek Atma, that itself is called Ayam Atma. So, through this self-inquiry, we come to recognize ourselves as that Atma as Brahma and gain abidance in it. Bhagavan says that itself leads to moksha. He says, Bandha muktyati tam param sukham vindati haji vastu daivika. One who follows this path sincerely, as guided by Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi and guided by all our scriptures, that person will gain that param sukham of his own self. He will gain eternal, everlasting bliss, which is the very nature of our own self. which is beyond the concept of bandhan and moksha. Actually, this concept of bandha moksha is also there in the state of ignorance. When we are ignorant, we say we are bound and we have to seek freedom. But once we come to recognize that self, there is nothing called bondage and freedom in it. It is everlasting bliss. And this we can gain by transcending our little ahankar, our I notion, and recognizing our own self as we are. So aham apetakam nija vibhanakam mahadidam tapo Ramana Vagyam. Ramana Maharshi says that this itself will be your great tapas to transcend your little aham vritti, recognize your own self and gain abidance in this self. So this is briefly an overview of this most fascinating and beautiful text, Upanishad, Upadesa Saram, which is like a Upanishad only, Upadesa Saram of Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi. So it was a great pleasure to participate in this 2-day session organized by Indica Moksha, Nitin and all his team. So I hope you enjoyed this 2-day session. And if you have any questions to ask, you may ask, and then after that we will conclude with a prayer.
Thank you very much, Swamiji, for the wonderful session. I'm sure all the viewers have deeply benefited from it. Viewers, now is the time for you to ask the questions if you have in the Q&A box, and I will take it up. Swamiji, we have received 1 or 2 questions. Let me read them. The first question is, why is Ahankar also called as Aham or pure self?
Again, please ask.
Why is Ahankar also called as Aham?
No, Aham is a vritti which happens like it is like when we keep a mirror, the whatever is kept in front of the mirror, the image just happens in the mirror. Similarly, the image keeps happening in our antakarana of any objects which come in front of us. So the objects of this world creates that image in our antakarana, which is also called that pratyaya. So that idam vritti is there. Similarly, the presence of the self in the ahankar, in the antakarana, creates this vritti called aham vritti. So it is a natural vritti which is born. But when we have a false notion about that aham vritti, when we think that aham is really this body, aham is a doer, aham is a knower, then that false notion is called ahankar.
Thank you.
So aham vritti is there in an enlightened person also. But there is no false notion, there is no ahankar.
Another question we have received is, when one gets aparoksha anubhuti, you become one with Brahman. Will one still feel fear or danger and such things?
See, we are one with Brahma even now. Even in the state of ignorance, I am Brahma only. But I have identified with this body, my mind, because of ignorance. So when I come to recognize my own self, I will, that false notion will disappear. But the body will continue to function. The mind will continue to function according to whatever prarabdha which has given rise to this body. And according to the samskar which is there in the mind and intellect and body will continue to function even after gaining enlightenment. But I will have no identification with it. So if there is a samskar of fear, then it might get expressed as fear also. If there is samskars of some disease or something, that also will get expressed. But I will not have any identification with it. So you might see an enlightened person as though getting frightened, as though getting sad, as though feeling miserable. but that is just kshetra dharma. It is the dharma of the body. It's just like after gaining enlightenment, if I put my finger in fire, still it will get burnt. So the mind, the intellect will continue to function as they are till the prarabdha remains. And once the prarabdha is exhausted, it will just fall off. But the enlightened person is always in bliss, always in that Brahma.
Swamiji, another question we have received is, what is meant by swasthiti? With the destruction of the mind, who or what is it that remains? Is it a disinterested witness or is it a void?
No. Actually, swasthitim is abidance in my own self as myself. And it expresses in my buddhi with that understanding that I am that Brahma. Its expression of my enlightenment will be in my buddhi. That knowledge will be there that I am this supreme self only. I am that Brahma. So the state of understanding or that knowledge will always be there. That itself is called swasthitim yataha. It is not that his eyes are closed or he is a witness or something like that. No. He is that Brahma itself. In Gita also, Bhagavan talks about sthita prajna, and even the term samadhi is used. That samadhi of Vedanta doesn't mean that there are no thoughts in the mind or one is just sitting like a witness or something. That samadhi is the knowledge of the self has happened and one remains as the self. And that understanding gets expressed in our buddhi also.
We have few more questions, Swamiji.
Yeah.
Where does ego goes during sleep, and is it possible to be aware during deep sleep state?
Actually, our ego, this Aham, it's part of Ahankar, means, Antakarana. Antakarana has got 4 expressions, Mana, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahankar. So when we are awake, the Antakarana is functioning, our senses are functioning, our body is functioning, we are interacting with the world. But then the senses become tired and they get withdrawn into the mind. They are actually connected to the mind only. So they get withdrawn into the mind. And when and the mind remains active, that is called dream. But after some time, the mind also gets tired, and the mind means the antakarana along with the ahankar and everything gets withdrawn into the pranas. They actually abide and rest in pranas, in the nadis of the pranas, called hita nadi. So hita nama nadi is there, in which the antakarana remains dormant. That itself is called deep sleep. Nothing changes happening, no change happen in Atma. Whether we are awake, sleeping, dreaming, unconscious, Atma remains a.
Swamiji, we have one more question.
Yes.
Since I am Brahman, I am God, then who do I worship? Where does that leave bhakti and worship? When we worship or pray, don't we create duality?
We actually are when we are ignorant, we are identified with our body and we have a limited understanding of our own personality. So when we have that understanding, then there are other people also who are different from me, whom I think different from me. And there is Ishvara also, who is different from me, who has got a total body of this entire creation is his body, and he is all knowing, all pervading, all powerful. So actions are performed. Even bhakti is an action. Upasana is also an action. Actions are performed in a state of ignorance only. And in a state of ignorance means I think of this duality. I have a notion of duality. So in a state of ignorance, bhakti is also a sadhana which we should perform to worship that Ishvara, whom I think as different from me. So no, let it be. Consider him as different from you and worship him till the mind becomes pure, and I will come to understand my oneness. So just because mind and Ishvara are one, but in a state of ignorance, when Vyavahar is there, we are doing Vyavahar in a what you call world of duality only. So bhakti, upasana, karma is all Vyavahar. But once I come to know Brahma, I as Brahma, there is no Vyavahar in it. There are no activities happening in it.
Thank you, Swamiji. If I might add to what you said, from a ritualistic perspective, in any puja, then there is a small part called as Atma Puja, and in it clearly says Soham Bhavena Pujayat. So you should, when you do the puja, when you do the bhakti, also you have to do it with a Soham Bhava. Sa, the Devi or Devata is non-different from ourselves. With that Bhava, the puja has to be done. That is how the Shastra say. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. Ultimately, Ishvara Swarup and my Swarup is one only. But when I do puja, I focus on his form and on his name. Therefore, I said that pujanam japas chintanam kramat. Puja is done of his form. Name you chant of his name. But chintan you do of his Swarupa. So puja will help us to become fit to do chintan. So don't do chintan while doing puja. Do one step at a time. When you are taking first step, don't try to jump on the floor, top floor. Take one step at a time.
I think that's it, Swamiji. Before we conclude, I want to ask one more question from my side.
Yes, sure.
While mentioning in the first half of the talk, you mentioned that even after attaining mukti, moksha, or aparoksha anubhuti, the jagat is still there. I think Ramana Maharshi also mentions this, and when he gives the example of mirage in a desert, even after you know that the water is not there, it's a mirage, still it appears so. But in the Mandokya Upanishad, in the description of Turiya Avastha, there is a term mentioned called as Prapancha Upashamam. So how should we understand that term then?
Prapancha Upashamam doesn't mean the world has disappeared, dissolved. Prapancha Upashamam means the world is seen as Brahma. Everything becomes Brahma. That is called Upashamam. Everything is, for example, this pot. Pot can be seen from the standpoint of its karya, and pot can be seen from the standpoint of its karan. Pot can be seen as a form, as a name, but you can look at the pot as clay also. So when you look at the clay, just look at it as a clay and understand it as a clay. What happens to the form? It gets dissolved into it. When you look at all the ornaments of gold, what happens to the ornament? When your drishti is only purely on gold, the ornament as though dissolve in that gold. So it is not a physically the world disappears, but you come to understand the world as Brahma. That is called Prapancha Upashama.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification, Swamiji. You can do the final prayers before we come.
Okay. We'll conclude with the prayer. And
Yes.
I invoke blessings of Bhagavan on all of you. May his kripa and blessing remain on all the sincere seekers, and may you progress steadily on your path and attain the supreme goal. So let us conclude with a prayer. Om सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्युर्मामृतङ्गमय ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्तिः 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 हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ
Thank you very much, Swamiji, on the behalf of entire Advaita Academy and all our viewers for this enlightening two lecture, enlightening weekend, and so much food for thought. I am sure many will be inspired to take up a more deeper study of Upadesha Saram and other works of Ramana Maharshi. And viewers, again, I am reminding you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Twitter to know about more events like this that we bring. So with this, we conclude this session. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha.